Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a conflict so vast it literally redrew the map of the world, redefined our ideas of good and evil, and left a mark on all of us. This is the story of World War II. Let's just start with a number: 70 million. It's almost impossible to really wrap your head around a number that big. And this isn't about money or miles. It's about something much, much heavier. That's the estimated death toll. Every single one of those was a person, a life, a story that was cut short. So yeah, this isn't just a history lesson. It's a look at a global tragedy that absolutely shaped the world we are all living in today. So to make sense of this massive event, here's how we're going to break it down. We'll start with the sheer scale of the war, look at how it all began, hit the major turning points, cover the end of the conflict, and finally, talk about why it all still matters so much. Okay, let's dive right in. When we say this was the biggest war in history, what does that actually mean? Let's try to get a handle on the scale of it all. Well, for 6 long and unbelievably brutal years from 1939 to 1945, the entire planet basically became a battlefield. We're talking about fighting that spanned from the deserts of North Africa to the islands of the Pacific. No continent was left untouched. So, how does the world get dragged into a war this huge? I mean, it doesn't happen overnight. It was really a perfect storm of rising tensions and opposing ideas that split the world in two, just waiting for a spark to set it all off. And the world really did fracture into two main sides. On one side, you had the Axis powers. That's mainly Germany, Italy, and Japan, all driven by these huge ambitions to expand their empires. And standing against them were the Allies. This was a really diverse group that included Great Britain, France, the Soviet Union, and eventually the United States, all coming together to stop the Axis advance. And this map really shows you this wasn't just some regional squabble in Europe. The conflict's tentacles, they reached everywhere, pulling in nations and colonies from North America to Asia to Australia. It was a truly global crisis. The spark that finally lit this global tinderbox was one aggressive move right in the heart of Europe. You know, after Adolf Hitler came to power in Germany in 1933, he just kept pushing boundaries. Well, on September 1st, 1939, he pushed too far. German tanks rolled into Poland. For Britain and France, that was the last straw. They declared war, and the world was plunged into conflict. Now, for the first few years, the Axis powers seemed almost unbeatable. They were just sweeping across country after country. But the thing about history is that it can change in an instant, and a couple of key moments were about to completely turn the tide of the war. And the first of these game changers didn't happen in Europe at all. It was a surprise attack halfway across the world that would awaken a nation many called a sleeping giant. On the morning of December 7th, 1941, Japan launched a shocking, devastating attack on the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. Over 2,400 Americans were killed. Japan hoped this would knock the U.S. out before it even got in, but boy, did it backfire. It united a stunned American public and brought the full industrial power of the United States into the war on the side of the Allies. President Franklin Roosevelt absolutely nailed the mood of the nation when he called it a date which will live in infamy. Those words captured the shock, the anger, and the resolve of a country that was now, suddenly, at war. So, with America now in the fight, the Allies began to plan their next massive move. This was going to be an invasion on a scale nobody had ever seen before. The largest sea invasion in all of human history, D-Day. Just try to picture it. On June 6, 1944, more than 150,000 Allied soldiers are hitting the beaches of Normandy in France. They're supported by this incredible armada of 5,000 ships stretching as far as the eye can see. And all of this is happening under the cover of 11,000 aircraft dominating the skies. This operation was immense. It punched a massive hole in Hitler's defenses in Europe and really marked the beginning of the end for the Nazis. So, with the Allies now pushing from all sides, victory started to seem inevitable. But as they peeled back the layers of the Axis regime, the true gut-wrenching horror of what had been happening in the shadows was revealed. The end of the war came in phases. First, on May 8, 1945, Germany surrendered. That's VE Day, victory in Europe. But the war in the Pacific was still raging. So the U.S. made the world-changing call to use its brand new, terrifying weapon, the atomic bomb, on the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. A few weeks later, on September 2nd, Japan officially surrendered, and the deadliest war in history was finally over. But as the Allied soldiers moved through Europe, they stumbled upon something so horrific it was almost beyond belief. The world was forced to confront the systematic, industrial-scale evil of the Holocaust. The calculated murder of 6 million Jewish people, along with millions of others, it remains one of the darkest chapters in our history. It's a terrifying reminder of what happens when hatred is allowed to run wild, unchecked. Okay, so the guns fell silent in 1945, but the world that was left behind was completely different. The war's legacy, its echoes, are all around us, even today, shaping the very world we live in. I mean, think about it. The United Nations was created directly out of the ashes of this war, with the #1 goal of making sure a catastrophe like this could never happen again. Our whole modern idea of international law and universal human rights was built on the lessons learned from this war. It was like a global promise to never forget. When you strip it all away, World War II taught us a brutally hard lesson about the price of looking the other way and why it's so critical to stand up to evil. And that leaves us with a really important question, one that's just as relevant now as it was then. How do we apply that lesson today?